Toby was just a poor fisherman, casting his nets into the forbidden waters of the Age River, a place whispered about in hushed tones by the elders. He thought he had caught the biggest fish of his life, but what he pulled from the water that day was never meant for human hands. What happened next would unleash the wrath of the ocean itself, summon ancient forces long thought to be myths, and drag Toby into a nightmare he could never escape. Sometimes, the most dangerous curse is the one you bring upon yourself, without even knowing it. This is the story of how a simple fisherman's greed doomed an entire village, and how the ocean always claims its dead in blood. Just before we dive deeper into this epic tale, we'd love to know where you're watching from. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow, we've got an extra special story lined up for you, and you definitely won't want to miss it. The village of Odin was known for its rich lands and the great river, Omiera, which had flowed through its heart for generations. The elders always spoke of the river with reverence, warning that its waters held secrets older than time itself. But hunger makes a man forget wisdom. Toby, a poor fisherman, had spent his whole life casting nets into the river, catching only enough fish to survive. His hut was small, his clothes were worn, and his stomach often grumbled at night. One fateful morning, he set out with his net, praying to the river spirits for a bountiful catch. The sun shone high, and the water glistened like melted gold. Toby waded into the river and cast his net. It was heavier than usual. His heart leaped. Had the spirits finally answered his prayers? Dragging the net to shore, he gasped. Inside, tangled with the fish, was a strange-looking creature. It was no fish, it had soft, shimmering blue skin, tiny webbed hands, and a long silver tail that gleamed under the sun. A water child. Toby whispered. He had heard of such things in old tales, but never had he seen one. His stomach rumbled. It was small, no bigger than a newborn goat. His hunger was stronger than his fear. That evening, Toby roasted the strange creature over his fire, its scent filling the air. He ate every last morsel, licking his fingers clean. He slept well that night, his belly full for the first time in weeks. But as he slept, something stirred in the darkness. In his dreams, Toby found himself in a vast, misty field. A tall, old man with deep-set eyes and a long gray beard stood before him. "Toby," the man said, his voice like the wind rustling through dry leaves. Toby knelt. "Who are you, Baba?" "I am Jide," the old man said, "a keeper of the old ways." Toby trembled. "Have I angered the spirits?" Jide smiled. "No, my son. You have done what any man would do to survive. For that, I grant you a blessing. From this day forth, your nets will never be empty, and your wealth will grow beyond your wildest dreams." Toby's eyes widened. "Truly, Baba." The old man nodded. "But wealth changes a man. Be wise." The dream faded, and Toby awoke to the sound of water lapping against the shore. He ran to his nets, heart pounding. As he pulled them in, his knees nearly buckled. The nets were full. Not just full, overflowing. More fish than he had ever caught in his life. His fortune had begun. Toby's life changed overnight. Every morning, his nets were full. Villagers whispered about his sudden fortune, and traders from neighboring villages came to buy his fish. His small hut became a grand house, built from the finest wood, with a red clay roof that shone under the sun. But wealth was not enough. Toby looked at the rich men in the village, the chiefs, the warriors, the traders. He wanted their respect. No, he wanted more. He wanted the highest seat in the land. He wanted to marry Princess Ada. She was the daughter of King Unknowingly, the ruler of Odin. Her beauty was like the morning sun, warm and golden. Her laughter was like music, and her presence made men weak in the knees. But she was promised only to a true prince. Toby had an idea. "I am not a fisherman anymore," he told himself. "I will become a prince. So he dressed in the finest robes, bought with his new wealth. He hired men to spread a story that he was a foreign prince from a distant land, exiled from his kingdom. A prince whose fortune had been restored by the gods. And the people believed. Far beneath the river, where the water was deep and dark, Nia wept. She was a mermaid queen, guardian of Omiera, and mother to the child who had been stolen from her. She had searched the waters, calling his name, but there was no answer. Then, she felt it, the truth, sharp as a spear. Her child had been eaten. A wail of grief echoed through the waters, shaking the riverbed. Fish darted away. Crocodiles swam to the surface in fear. The river churned, restless and angry. "I will not take his life," Nia whispered, her eyes burning with sorrow. "No. That would be too kind." She closed her eyes and let her voice drift through the waters, up into the ears of those who needed to hear it. The other suitors of Princess Ada. Toby stood before the king's court, his head held high. He had won the people's hearts. His riches were unmatched, his charm undeniable. But the true princes, the sons of noble kings, watched him with darkened eyes. Something was not right. How did a foreign prince, exiled and penniless, gain such sudden wealth? One prince murmured. "I have heard whispers," another said. "His fortune is unnatural. The river spirits are restless." The whispers grew louder. Doubt slithered through the palace halls like a snake. Princess Ada, however, saw none of it. She saw only the men who had stolen her heart. But fate was not done with Toby yet. The night of the final selection arrived. The palace was filled with music and laughter. Drummers beat their talking drums, their rhythms shaking the earth. The smell of roasted meat filled the air. At the height of the celebration, the doors burst open. A woman entered. Her skin shimmered like wet pearls, and her eyes glowed like the moon. Her robe, woven from riverweed, flowed like water as she walked. The air grew cold. The torches flickered. Nia had arrived. She stepped forward, her gaze locking onto Toby. "You," she said. The hall fell silent. Toby's mouth went dry. He knew, in that instant, that his secret had been laid bare. Nia turned to the king. "This man is not who he says he is." Gasps filled the room. The princes smirked. "He is no prince," Nia continued. "He is a fisherman who stole from the sacred river. He took what was mine. He took my child." The king's face darkened. The people murmured. Toby fell to his knees. "Forgive me." Silence. Nia's voice was sharp as a blade. She took a step closer, her eyes burning with power. "You took my child from me. Now, I take something from you." She raised a hand, her fingers curled like claws. "The price is blood," she said. "Your firstborn shall be mine." A gasp rang through the court. All eyes turned to Princess Ada. Her hand trembled over her belly. She was pregnant. Chaos erupted. The king rose in fury. The guards drew their swords. The princes whispered among themselves. Toby felt the weight of his sins crashing down upon him. But this was only the beginning. The palace erupted like a pot of boiling water. "The princess carries his child," someone cried. "A curse upon the royal bloodline," another voice wailed. King Unknowingly slammed his staff against the ground. The heavy thud silenced the room. His face was like stone, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Toby," the king's voice was low but sharp, "is this true?" Toby's body was frozen. His heart pounded like the festival drums. He had fought his way from poverty to the steps of royalty, only for it all to crumble before his eyes. He could not lie. Not now. He turned to Ada, his voice breaking. "Is it true?" Ada's hands trembled over her belly. She could barely speak, but the tears in her eyes were answer enough. The truth shattered whatever hope Toby had left. The people shouted in fear. The guards stood ready, their spears aimed at him. The suitors, who once envied him, now smirked at his downfall. And Nia, the mermaid mother, stood in the center of it all, calm as the deep sea before a storm. "You owe me a life," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Your firstborn will be mine, as you took mine from me." Ada gasped, holding her belly tighter. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Not my child." But fate had already been set in motion. The ground beneath them trembled. The torches flickered wildly. The air grew thick with something unseen, something ancient. The river had come to collect its debt. King Unknowingly's face was unreadable, but his fists were clenched at his sides. The laws of Odin were clear, no cursed blood could sit upon the throne. But this was his daughter. A man's duty as king and his duty as a father were now at war. He turned to his advisors. What must be done? One elder, gray-haired and wise, stepped forward. "The mermaid speaks truth. He has brought a curse upon this house. The child must be taken, or else the kingdom will suffer." "No," Ada cried. Another elder shook his head. "A life for a life. The fisherman must pay." "No." Ada stepped forward, her voice rising in desperation. "He is no longer a fisherman. He is my betrothed. My love." She turned to her father, her eyes pleading. "You cannot let them take my child." The king's face darkened. "And what would you have me do?" Silence fell. Finally, King Unknowingly turned to Nia. "If we refuse, what will happen?" Nia's expression remained unreadable. "The river will claim what is owed," she said simply. "By force, if necessary." A chill ran through the crowd. Everyone knew what that meant. Famine. Disease. Drought. The river was the lifeblood of Odin. If the river turned against them, the kingdom would crumble. The king had no choice. His decision came swiftly, like the swing of a blade. "Toby," he said, his voice firm, "you are to be banished." The room gasped. "You will leave this land and never return. The princess shall remain here until her child is born. If the mermaid does not take the child by her own hands, we will offer it to the river ourselves." Toby's world shattered. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "No, please." But the guards were already moving. Two strong men grabbed him by the arms, dragging him toward the palace doors. "Toby!" Ada screamed. She lunged forward, but her father held her back. The last thing Toby saw before the doors slammed shut was Ada's tear-streaked face, her hands still clinging to her stomach. His child. His only hope. And he was powerless to stop what was coming. The journey through the wilderness was long and cruel. The guards took him beyond the borders of Odin, to the very edge of the land, where the thick forests met the vast, merciless desert. Here, they left him. With no food. No water. No weapon. Just a single warning. "If you try to return," one guard sneered, "we will kill you." Then they turned and left, their footsteps fading into the distance. Toby stood alone in the silence, the weight of his fate pressing down on him. Banishment. Stripped of his title. Torn from his love. Doomed to lose his child. His knees buckled, and he sank to the ground. The sky stretched endlessly above him, vast and empty, offering no answers. Was this the fate Gide, the mysterious old man, had warned him about? Was this the price of greed? The sun burned high, and his throat was already dry. The forest behind him held dangers he could not fight, and the desert ahead was endless. There was no way to survive. He was going to die here. Unless fate had other plans. Toby wondered. His body weakened with every step. His vision blurred. His lips cracked from thirst. Night fell, and with it came the howls of unseen beasts. The ground beneath him became rough and hot again as he stumbled onto endless stretches of sand. Then, at the horizon, he saw it. Water. The sea. It stretched as far as the eye could see, dark and glimmering under the moonlight. He fell to his knees. His fingers dug into the wet sand. The waves whispered as they rolled in, cool and soothing. But something else moved beneath the water. A figure. A woman. She rose from the sea like a ghost, her hair flowing like black silk, her eyes deep and knowing. Toby's breath caught. Who are you?" The woman stepped forward. Her bare feet left no prints in the sand. "I am someone who has been watching you for a long time," she said. "And I am not done with you yet." Toby's heart pounded. This was no ordinary woman. This was another mermaid. But was she here to save him? Or to finish what Nia had started? Toby sat frozen in the wet sand, his heart hammering. The woman before him was no ordinary being. Her skin gleamed under the moonlight, her eyes dark as the depths of the ocean. She was beautiful, but in an eerie, otherworldly way. She was like Nia. A mermaid. Yet, something was different about her. Who are you?" Toby's voice was hoarse from thirst. The woman tilted her head, studying him. "I have had many names," she said, her voice smooth as the waves. "But you may call me Kenna." Toby swallowed. "Are you here to punish me?" Kenna smiled, cold and knowing. "If I wanted you dead, fisherman, you would not be breathing." A chill ran down Toby's spine. "Then why are you here?" he asked. Kenna stepped closer, kneeling beside him. "Because I know what you have lost. And I know what you desire most." Toby's hands curled into fists. "My child." "Yes." Kenna's gaze bore into his. "Nia has claimed her price. But not all debts are unbreakable." Toby's breath caught. "You mean, you can stop her?" Kenna chuckled softly. "Not quite. But I can help you fight back." Hope flickered in Toby's chest. "What must I do?" Kenna's smile widened. "Ah, now we come to the price." Toby tensed. He knew better than to trust easily. Kenna's fingers traced circles in the sand. "If I help you, you must do something for me in return. A simple thing, really." Toby narrowed his eyes. "What is it?" Kenna leaned in, her lips close to his ear. "You must steal something for me," she whispered. Toby's stomach twisted. "Steal? From who?" Kenna's smile deepened, her eyes gleaming. "From Nia." Toby's throat tightened. This was madness. How could he steal from the mother of the very child he had wronged? But what choice did he have? Toby hesitated. "What do you want me to steal?" Kenna's eyes flickered like moonlight on water. "A pearl. But not just any pearl. The heart of the river." Toby frowned. "The heart of the river?" Kenna nodded. "It is Nia's greatest treasure. It grants her power over the waters. Without it, she will be vulnerable." Toby's pulse quickened. "And you think I can take it?" Kenna chuckled. "Not alone." She turned toward the ocean, raising her hands. The waves trembled. From beneath the surface, something glowed, a faint, blue light. Then, rising from the depths, a small, delicate object floated toward them. A seashell. It landed softly in Kenna's palm, shimmering like silver. She held it out to Toby. "This is my gift to you," she said. "A token of the deep. It will allow you to breathe underwater. With it, you may enter Nia's domain." Toby reached out, his fingers brushing against the cool surface of the shell. This was his chance. His only hope. Kenna's voice turned serious. But be warned. If Nia catches you before you take the pearl, you will never leave the water alive. Toby swallowed hard. I understand. Kenna nodded, her expression unreadable. Then prepare yourself, fisherman. The battle for your child has begun. Meanwhile, back in Odin, Ada was trapped. Her father had confined her to her chambers. She was guarded day and night, watched as if she were a criminal. But she was not a prisoner. She was a mother. And she would not let them take her child. Late at night, she sat by her window, gazing at the stars. Somewhere out there, Toby was fighting for them. She pressed a hand to her belly. We will not let them take you, she whispered to the life growing within her. Then, an idea struck her. She could not leave the palace. But there was someone who could help her. Someone who had never turned their back on her. Her childhood friend, Ao, the palace healer's daughter. That night, as the guards dozed off, Ada sent a secret message through a servant. Ao must come. There was no time to waste. Toby stood at the edge of the sea, the enchanted seashell in his grip. The waves crashed against the shore, calling him forward. Kenna watched him with quiet amusement. Are you afraid? Toby exhaled sharply. No. She raised a brow. Good. Then go. Toby pressed the shell to his lips and whispered a prayer. Then, he stepped into the water. The moment the waves swallowed him, the magic took hold. He did not struggle. He did not choke. He breathed. The ocean stretched before him, deep and vast. Strange fish darted past. Coral shimmered in colors he had never seen before. And far below, a palace of stone and gold lay hidden in the darkness. Nia's home. Toby clenched his fists. He had one chance. He dived into the deep, toward the heart of the river's wrath. What happens next? Will Toby succeed in stealing the heart of the river? Can Ada escape the palace before it's too late? And what secrets is Kenna hiding? The battle for fate has begun. Toby swam deeper, the enchanted seashell pulsing faintly in his hand. He had never been in water this long before, never moved so easily through the depths. It was as if the sea itself welcomed him. The underwater palace of Nia loomed ahead, vast and silent. Its walls were carved from shimmering coral, glowing faintly in the darkness. Strange creatures slithered through the currents, their eyes watching him. A school of silver fish scattered as he approached the gates. They were enormous, carved from black stone, guarded by two towering warriors, mermen with spears of sharpened bone. Toby hid behind a cluster of rocks, his heart pounding. How would he get past them? Then, a voice whispered through the water. Use the shell. Toby hesitated, then pressed the enchanted shell against his chest. Immediately, his body began to change. His skin darkened, taking on the smooth, scaled appearance of the merman. His legs tingled, then fused together, transforming into a powerful tail. He was one of them now. Swallowing his fear, he straightened his posture and swam toward the gates. The guards barely spared him a glance. Toby slipped past them and entered the palace. Now, he had to find the heart of the river. The palace was alive with movement. Merfolk glided through grand hallways, their whispers filling the water like a song. Toby kept his head down, following the strongest current. It led him toward the heart of the palace, to a massive chamber guarded by more warriors. He hid behind a coral pillar, peering inside. There, at the center of the room, lay a pedestal carved from ancient stone. Upon it sat a single, glowing pearl, deep blue, pulsing like a heartbeat. The heart of the river. Toby's breath caught. He was so close. But how could he take it without being seen? He needed a distraction. His eyes darted to a nearby lanternfish, its body flickering with light. An idea formed. Carefully, he scooped up a loose stone and threw it toward the creature. The impact startled the fish, causing it to flash wildly. The sudden burst of light sent the guards into confusion. Now was his chance. Toby surged forward, snatching the pearl from the pedestal. The moment his fingers closed around it, the entire palace shuddered. The water trembled. The walls groaned. And a deafening scream ripped through the sea. Toby's blood ran cold. Nia knew. From the depths of the palace, Nia rose. Her eyes blazed with fury, her hair swirling like a storm. "Who dares?" her voice thundered, shaking the ocean floor. Toby clutched the pearl to his chest and bolted. The palace erupted into chaos. Guards swarmed after him, their spears slicing through the water. Toby weaved between coral formations, dodging their attacks. But Nia was faster. She appeared before him in a flash, her claws outstretched. "You dare steal from me," she hissed. Toby's heart pounded. He had to escape, but how? Then, the seashell in his hand burned. Kenna's voice whispered in his mind. "Break the shell." Without thinking, Toby crushed the seashell in his fist. A blinding light exploded. The water twisted, pulling Toby into a rushing current. He was yanked upward, shooting through the sea like an arrow. The last thing he saw was Nia's furious face before he was hurled onto the shore, gasping for breath. The pearl was still in his hands. But Nia would not stop hunting him now. Back in Odin, Ada paced her chambers, waiting. Finally, the door creaked open. Ao slipped inside, her eyes wide. "Ada, what's happening?" "The whole palace is whispering about a curse." Ada grabbed her friend's hands. "Ao, I need your help. I have to escape before they take my child." Ao's eyes darted toward the door. "The king has doubled the guards. How will you get past them?" Ada took a deep breath. "There is a hidden passage in the gardens. My mother once told me about it. We must go now." Ao hesitated, then nodded. "I'll get a cloak to disguise you." Moments later, Ada was draped in dark fabric, following Ao through the halls. They slipped into the gardens, moving swiftly. But just as they reached the passage, "Halt!" A guard blocked their path, his spear pointed at Ada's belly. "You are not to leave the palace," he growled. Ada clenched her fists. "I will not let you take my child." The guard smirked. "You don't have a choice." Ada's heart pounded. Was this the end of her escape? Or would fate intervene once more? Toby ran. He did not stop until he reached the forests beyond the shore. The pearl still glowed in his grip, its warmth pulsing against his skin. Kenna appeared before him, her expression unreadable. "You have done well," she said. Toby gasped for air. "Now, tell me how to stop Nia." Kenna's lips curved into a slow smile. "The pearl weakens her. But if you want to truly defeat her..." She leaned closer. "You must return to Odin." Toby's heart dropped. Odin, the place he was banished from. If he set foot there, the king would have him killed. But he had no choice. Ada was still there. And so was his unborn child. Toby squared his shoulders. "I will go." Kenna's eyes gleamed. "Then prepare yourself, fisherman. The final battle is near." Ada stared at the guard blocking her path, her heart hammering. His spear glinted in the moonlight, inches from her swollen belly. "You will not leave," he repeated, voice firm. But Ada was not the same timid princess she had once been. She had seen betrayal, suffered heartbreak, and now carried a child the kingdom wanted to take from her. She would not surrender. Ao gripped her arm, her fingers trembling. "Ada, we must do something." Before the guard could react, Ada snatched a handful of sand from the garden path and threw it into his eyes. The man let out a cry, stumbling backward, rubbing at his face. "Run!" Ada shouted. Ao pulled her forward, and together, they darted into the hidden passage, the entrance covered by thick vines. The moment they stepped inside, the air grew damp. The tunnel was dark and narrow, twisting beneath the palace walls. Ada fought to keep her breathing steady as they ran, her mind racing. If they could make it past the city walls, they had a chance. But would they be fast enough? Behind them, an alarm sounded. The palace guards knew. And they were coming. Toby stood at the edge of Odin, hidden beneath a heavy cloak. The pearl pulsed in his grip, its glow faint under the fabric. The last time he had been here, he had been dragged through the streets in chains, beaten, banished. Now, he was returning, not as a beggar, not as an exile, but as a father fighting for his child. Kenna stood beside him, her expression unreadable. "If they catch you, they will kill you," she reminded him. Toby's jaw tightened. "Then I won't let them catch me." Kenna chuckled. "Brave words, fisherman. But bravery is not enough. You will need a plan." Toby exhaled. He knew she was right. First, he needed to find Ada. Then, they had to escape, before Nia came for them all. Pulling his hood lower, he slipped into the city, his heart pounding. The game of fate was reaching its climax. And there was no turning back. Ada and Ao ran through the tunnel, their footsteps echoing. The exit was close. Ada could see the faint glow of moonlight ahead. But so could the guards. "They're in the passage," a voice shouted behind them. Torches flared, shadows flickered, and the sound of heavy boots filled the tunnel. They were closing in. Ada's lungs burned. She had to make it. Then, an arm yanked her backward. She let out a gasp, struggling, but strong hands held her firm. It was not a guard. It was Toby. "Ada." His voice was rough, desperate. "We have to go." Ada's heart stopped. "Toby." She touched his face, almost afraid he wasn't real. Then, a spear whizzed past them, embedding itself in the tunnel wall. The guards were too close. There was no time for tears, no time for questions. Toby grabbed her hand. "Run." And together, they fled into the night. The next morning, King Obi stood before his warriors, his face a mask of rage. His daughter was gone. The exiled fisherman had returned. And now, whispers of a sea curse spread like wildfire. "Nia will not let this go unpunished," his advisor muttered. "The river goddess will come for us all." King Obi slammed his staff against the floor. "Then we will find them before she does." He turned to his best warriors. "Bring them back," he ordered. Dead or alive. The hunt had begun. Far from the palace, deep within the waves, Nia seethed. The pearl was gone. Toby had taken it. And now, she would take everything from him. Rising from the depths, she whispered into the currents. Her voice carried through the rivers and streams, reaching every creature, every whispering tide. "Find the fisherman. Find the woman. And bring me the child." The ocean itself trembled. Nia's revenge was at hand. Toby, Ada, and Ao hurried through the forest, moving toward the mountains. "We can't stop now," Toby said, his eyes scanning the trees. "The king's men will come for us. And so will Nia." Ada squeezed his hand. "We can't keep running forever." Toby exhaled. "Then we make our stand." Ada frowned. "What do you mean?" Toby turned, holding up the glowing pearl. "Nia's power is in this," he said. "If we can use it, maybe we can stop her." Ao looked uneasy. "And if we fail?" Toby met Ada's gaze. Then we lose everything. Ada touched her belly, determination hardening her features. Then we will not fail. The battle for fate had begun. And only one side would survive. What happens next? Will Toby and Ada use the pearl to defeat Nia? Or will the mermaid goddess claim her revenge? The final battle is near. The forest whispered with the sound of approaching danger. Toby, Ada, and Ao moved carefully through the undergrowth, their footsteps muffled by damp earth. The glow of the stolen pearl pulsed against Toby's chest, casting faint blue light against the trees. We need to find shelter before nightfall, Ao whispered, glancing over her shoulder. The king's warriors will track us. Ada placed a protective hand over her belly, her heart pounding. And Nia. Toby's grip on the pearl tightened. She won't stop hunting us. His voice was low but determined. But I won't let her take our child. As they pressed on, the sky darkened, heavy clouds rolling in. A distant rumble of thunder warned them of an approaching storm. But the air was thick with more than just rain. Nia was close. The river goddess had sent her whispers through the land. Every stream, every lake, every drop of water carried her rage. And soon, she would arrive. Back at the palace, King Obi stood in the great hall, watching as his warriors armed themselves. His daughter had fled. His people were afraid. And an ancient curse was about to be unleashed upon the kingdom. Find them, he commanded his men. Before the river does. His finest tracker, Ikin, stepped forward. We will not fail, my king. With that, the warriors set out, their torches flickering in the growing storm. They would hunt Toby and Ada through the night. And if they found them first, they would show no mercy. Toby, Ada, and Ao found shelter beneath a rocky overhang just as the storm broke. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, soaking the ground. But the storm was unnatural. The river was rising. From the darkness, a voice slithered through the trees. Fisherman. Toby stiffened, heart hammering. He knew that voice. Nia had arrived. Lightning split the sky, revealing her figure standing at the edge of the riverbank. Her long, dark hair whipped in the wind, her eyes glowing like deep ocean waters. She did not look human. Not anymore. She was the storm itself. You have stolen from me, she whispered, her voice laced with grief and fury. Now, I will take what is mine. She raised her hands, and the river surged forward. A massive wave roared toward them, filled with writhing water spirits and shadowy creatures from the depths. Toby grabbed Ada and Ao, pulling them backward as the water crashed into the rocks, missing them by inches. Nia, please. Ada shouted, stepping forward. Spare my child. But Nia's face twisted with sorrow and rage. You took mine, she whispered. Now, I take yours. The river goddess lunged. Toby had only seconds to react. He gripped the pearl and held it high. The blue light blazed, pushing Nia back. She let out a shriek as the glow repelled her, the storm shuddering around them. But the pearl was not enough. Nia's power was too great. Toby knew what he had to do. He turned to Ada, his eyes filled with pain. Take the pearl, he said. Ada's breath hitched. What? No. Toby pressed the glowing pearl into her hands. It's the only thing that can protect you. You have to keep our child safe. Ao grabbed Ada's arm, pulling her back. We have to go. Ada's tears mixed with the rain. Toby. But before she could stop him, Toby stepped forward. Toward Nia. Nia's glowing eyes locked onto him. You think surrender will save them, she sneered. Toby lifted his chin. Take me instead, he said. Spare Ada. Spare my child. Nia's expression flickered. For a moment, grief clouded her fury. She had once been a mother too. The river swirled around her feet, hesitant. Then, slowly, she stepped forward. "If I take you," she whispered, "you will never see them again." Toby swallowed hard. His heart ached at the thought. But he nodded. "If that is the price, I will pay it." The wind howled. The river churned. And then, Nia raised her hand. The waters rose around Toby, swallowing him whole. Ada screamed. The last thing Toby saw was the pain in her eyes before the river dragged him down, down, down. Into the darkness. Darkness. That was all Toby knew. The river had swallowed him whole, dragging him into its depths. The cold wrapped around him like a heavy shroud, squeezing the breath from his lungs. He tried to move, but the water was too strong. It pulled him downward, deeper than he ever thought a river could go. Then, suddenly, he could breathe. Toby gasped, his eyes flying open. He was no longer sinking. He was standing at the bottom of the river. But this was no ordinary riverbed. All around him, the water shimmered with an eerie glow. Strange, glowing fish darted through the shadows. A coral palace, massive and ancient, rose from the depths, its spires twisting like the branches of an ancient tree. And in the distance, figures moved. Toby's heart pounded. He was not alone. The figures stepped closer, their faces coming into view. Toby's breath caught in his throat. They were men. Fishermen, warriors, even nobles, dozens of them. But their skin was pale, almost translucent. Their eyes were hollow, filled with an unnatural sorrow. They moved slowly, as if trapped in an endless dream. "The lost ones," a voice whispered. Toby turned sharply. Nia stood before him. Her flowing gown shimmered like water, her hair floating as if caught in an invisible current. "You are now one of them," she said softly. "Those who have taken from the river, and have paid the price." Toby's fists clenched. "You promised you would spare Ada and my child." Nia's lips curled into a sad smile. "And so I have." She gestured toward the lost souls around him. "But you belong to me now." Toby's chest tightened. Was this it? Would he be trapped here forever? He could not accept that. He would not accept that. Toby had always been a survivor. Even in the worst of storms, he had found a way to keep fighting. He would do the same now. While Nia was distracted, he studied the prison of lost souls. The riverbed was vast, but he noticed something strange, a path of light leading upward. Could that be the way out? He needed help. Toby turned to one of the lost men, an old fisherman with sad eyes. "Is there a way to escape?" he whispered. The man flinched, glancing at Nia in fear. Then, in a barely audible voice, he muttered, "The pearl." Toby's pulse quickened. The pearl. Ada had it. And if he could reach it, he might still have a chance. But how? He needed a distraction. Toby turned back to Nia, taking a deep breath. And then, he challenged her. "You still mourn your child," Toby said, stepping closer to Nia. "You punish me because you lost him. But do you really think this will bring you peace?" Nia's expression darkened. "You know nothing of my grief." "I know enough," Toby said. "You took my freedom, but I will make you a bargain." Nia's eyes narrowed. "You have nothing to offer me." Toby smiled. "I have knowledge." Nia hesitated. "What knowledge?" Toby exhaled, "Gambling everything. The soul of your child, it is not lost." For the first time, Nia looked uncertain. "If I find him," Toby pressed on, "will you let me go?" The water stilled. Then, slowly, Nia nodded. "You have 3 days," she said. "Fail, and you will belong to the river forever." The countdown had begun. Above the water, Ada clutched the glowing pearl, her heart heavy with grief. Toby was gone. And now, the king's warriors were closing in. She had to keep moving. But the baby inside her stirred, and a sudden wave of exhaustion crashed over her. "Are you all right?" Ao asked, worry etched on her face. Ada nodded weakly. "We must find help." "But where?" Then, a rustling sound came from the trees. A figure stepped forward. A man cloaked in red, his eyes filled with secrets. "I have been waiting for you, Princess Ada," he said softly. Ada's blood ran cold. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "I am the one who knows how to bring Toby back." The man led Ada and Ao deeper into the forest, where an ancient shrine stood, covered in vines. "My name is Jide," he said. "And I know the truth about the river's curse." Ada's heart pounded. "Tell me." Jide knelt before the shrine, his fingers brushing against the old stone. "The mermaid's child was never truly lost." Ada gasped. "Then where is he?" Jide's eyes met hers. "He was reborn." A cold chill ran through Ada. "Reborn, as what?" Jide hesitated. Then, in a whisper, he said, "As your child." "What happens next?" "Toby has only 3 days to find the lost soul. Ada has just uncovered a terrifying secret, and the kingdom is on the brink of collapse." Ada staggered backward, gripping her belly as Jide's words echoed in her mind. "Your child is the mermaid's lost son." "Impossible." Her breath came in quick gasps. "No. That can't be." Jide's gaze was calm but firm. "It is the truth." Ao looked between them, her eyes wide with fear. "But if that's true, then Nia will never stop hunting you, Ada." Ada's heart pounded. The river goddess thought she had lost her child forever, but in a cruel twist of fate, her lost baby had been reborn in Ada's womb. Would this revelation save them? Or would it doom them all? Meanwhile, beneath the river, Toby searched desperately. He had 3 days to find Nia's lost son, but he now understood the horrifying truth. The soul he was looking for wasn't here in the depths. It was inside Ada. Toby clenched his fists. How could he tell Nia? If she found out, would she rip the child from Ada's womb? Would she spare them, or would her rage consume everything? There was only one way to ensure Ada and the baby survived. Toby had to trick the goddess. He turned to the lost souls. "Help me," he pleaded. There must be another way to satisfy Nia's grief. The old fisherman who had spoken to him earlier stepped forward. His eyes glowed with an ancient wisdom. "There is a way," the old man whispered. "But it will require a sacrifice." Toby swallowed hard. "Whose?" The old man's gaze darkened. "Yours." At the palace, King Obi sat on his throne, his fingers drumming against the armrest. His daughter was missing. His kingdom was falling apart. And now, the whispers of the river's wrath filled his halls. One of his generals knelt before him. "Your Majesty, we have searched the land. The princess has vanished." Obi's jaw tightened. If he could not find Ada, there was only one other way to save his kingdom from the curse. He turned to the court priest. "Summon the spirit speakers. We will bargain with the river goddess ourselves." The priest hesitated. "But my king, to call upon her is dangerous." Obi slammed his fist on the throne. "Then let her come in fury. I will end this curse myself." The court fell silent. King Obi was about to do the unthinkable. The sky over the kingdom darkened. A storm like no other gathered above the palace. The river swelled, rising higher and higher, spilling into the streets. The people screamed as the waters consumed their homes. And then, she appeared. Nia. She rose from the flood, her glowing eyes burning with rage. "You dare summon me, King Obi," she hissed, her voice like the roar of the ocean. The king stood tall. "I do. And I demand an end to this madness." Nia laughed, a terrible, bone-chilling sound. "You do not make demands of the river," she said. "You have already lost." The waters swirled violently, threatening to consume the palace. And then, a single voice cut through the storm. "Wait." The crowd turned. It was Ada. Soaked from the rain, the glowing pearl clutched in her hands, she stepped forward. And with unshakable courage, she spoke the words that would decide all their fates. "I know where your son is. What happens next? Ada has just made a dangerous move. Toby is still trapped, the kingdom is drowning, and the truth is about to come out. Will Nia spare them, or will the river take everything?" The storm paused. Nia's glowing eyes locked onto Ada, her face unreadable. The wind still howled, the waters still raged, but for a single heartbeat, the world stood still. "You lie," Nia whispered. Ada clutched her stomach. "I do not." Jide, standing behind her, stepped forward. "The child you lost was never taken from you. He was reborn." The court gasped. King Obi froze, his grip tightening on the ceremonial staff in his hand. The revelation spread like wildfire. Toby was no longer the villain who had stolen from the river. The goddess herself had unknowingly given her own child back to the world. But would she accept this? Or would her wrath destroy them all? Deep beneath the river, Toby felt it. A shift in the water. A change in the current of fate. The lost souls around him trembled. "She knows," the old fisherman whispered. Toby's heart pounded. This was his chance. With all his strength, he pushed forward, swimming toward the path of light he had seen before. The waters fought against him, but he refused to stop. He had to return. For Ada. For his child. For his destiny. Then, suddenly, a hand grabbed him. Toby twisted, his breath catching. Nia stood before him. Her gaze burned like fire and ice. "You dare to run." Toby held his ground. "I dare to finish what you started." For a long moment, Nia studied him. Then, with a flick of her wrist, the water exploded. And Toby was thrown toward the surface. The palace courtyard was in chaos. People screamed as the waters crept higher, flooding the land. Ada stood firm, gripping the pearl, her body trembling. She did not know if her words had saved them or doomed them. Then, a great wave rose from the river. And from its depths, a figure emerged. Soaked, breathless, but alive. Toby had returned. The crowd gasped. The exiled prince had defied death itself. And now, he stood before the river goddess one last time. Nia hovered in the air, her power crackling like a storm. Her gaze shifted between Ada's swollen belly and Toby's defiant stare. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "If this is true," she said slowly, "then I have lost my way." Toby stepped forward. "You wanted justice," he said. "But your grief made you blind." Nia's fingers tightened into fists. The air around her shimmered with power. Then, she exhaled. The storm ceased. The waters stilled. And in the quiet, the goddess lowered herself to the ground. She placed a single hand on Ada's belly. A golden glow spread from her fingertips, surrounding the unborn child in a warm light. "A child of two worlds," she whispered. "Born of land and sea." The air shifted. Nia turned to Toby, and for the first time, there was no hatred in her eyes. "The curse is broken," she declared. The kingdom erupted in cheers. But as the people celebrated, the goddess turned once more. And left them with one final warning. "You have won my mercy today," Nia said, her voice echoing across the courtyard. "But beware." Her eyes darkened. This child is no ordinary being. Ada's heartbeat quickened. Toby frowned. "What do you mean?" Nia's gaze bore into him. "He will be powerful. More than you can imagine. And if he is not guided well, the world itself may tremble under his wrath." Silence fell over the kingdom. A chill ran through Ada's veins. Her child was safe, for now. But the future? That was a battle yet to come. And as the goddess vanished into mist, Toby and Ada knew. Their story was far from over. What happens next? The curse is lifted, the kingdom is safe, and Toby has cheated death. But now, a new danger looms. The child of two worlds will grow, and his power will shake the land. Will he become a blessing? Or a curse greater than his mother's? The moon hung low over the kingdom, casting a silver glow over the palace walls. The air was heavy with the scent of rain, though the storm had long since passed. Inside the royal chambers, Ada screamed. Sweat dripped from her forehead as she gripped the silk sheets beneath her. The midwives worked frantically, their hands steady but their hearts racing. "The child is coming," one of them cried. Toby stood nearby, his hands clenched into fists. His heart pounded so loudly that it nearly drowned out the sound of Ada's cries. Jide stood beside him, his face grim. "Remember what the goddess said," he murmured. Toby swallowed. How could he forget? If he is not guided well, the world itself may tremble under his wrath. Then, a sharp cry pierced the air. The midwives froze. For a moment, time stood still. Then, slowly, one of the women lifted the newborn into the air. The baby's skin shimmered, glowing faintly under the torchlight. His tiny fingers curled and uncurled, and when his eyes fluttered open, they were as deep and endless as the ocean itself. Toby felt his breath catch. Jide's voice was barely above a whisper. "The child of two worlds has been born." And outside the palace, deep beneath the river, Nia opened her eyes. A new destiny had begun. As days passed, whispers spread throughout the kingdom. The royal child was no ordinary baby. He never cried when he was hungry. Instead, the palace fountains would overflow as if answering an unseen call. When he laughed, the air grew thicker with the scent of the sea, even though the ocean was miles away. And when Ada held him close, she swore she could hear the sound of waves crashing in his tiny heartbeat. The people began to murmur. Is he a gift, or a curse? The elders spoke in hushed voices. Some feared the prophecy. Others believed he would unite the two worlds. But there was one thing they all agreed on. This child was not meant for an ordinary life. Late one night, Ada sat awake, watching her baby sleep. His small chest rose and fell, peaceful, innocent. But deep inside her, fear gnawed at her heart. What if I cannot control him? She thought of Nia's warning. The goddess had not cursed the child, but she had not blessed him either. She had simply left him in their hands. A door creaked open. Toby entered, his face tired but determined. You're still awake? Ada nodded. I keep wondering, what if we fail him? Toby sat beside her, placing a hand on hers. Then we don't. Ada looked at him, searching his face for the certainty she lacked. Jide believes this child is meant to change the world, she whispered. Toby's jaw tightened. Then we will teach him how. But neither of them noticed the tiny, glistening droplets forming on the child's fingertips. Salt water. The ocean was already calling. The kingdom was still celebrating the birth when the first omen arrived. A lone traveler appeared at the palace gates. His robes were dark, lined with golden patterns that shimmered in the sun. His face was hidden beneath a hood, but when he spoke, his voice was like the rolling tides. I have come for the child. The guards crossed their spears. Who are you? The stranger slowly pulled back his hood. His face was weathered by time, his skin etched with marks of the deep. But his eyes, they were the same as the child's. The wind howled through the courtyard. And for the first time since the child's birth, the people felt true fear. Toby and Ada were summoned at once. Jide stood beside them, his expression unreadable as they faced the stranger. Who are you? Toby demanded. The men did not bow, nor did he offer his name. Instead, he studied the child cradled in Ada's arms. Then, he whispered 4 words that sent chills down their spines. He is not yours. Ada held the baby tighter. He is my son. The man's gaze was steady. No. He belongs to the ocean. Toby stepped forward. What do you want? The stranger exhaled. To warn you. The air around them grew thick with tension. The child's power is growing, the stranger continued. And others have sensed it. Toby's fists clenched. Others. The men nodded. There are beings older than the river goddess. They have slumbered for generations, but now, they are waking. Ada felt her heartbeat quicken. You must prepare, the stranger said. Because when they come. His voice lowered to a whisper. They will want him for themselves. Silence filled the courtyard. A single droplet of water fell from the sky, though the sun still shone. And somewhere, in the depths of the ocean, something stirred. What happens next? A new danger is awakening. The child of 2 worlds is growing in power, and ancient beings have begun to notice. But who is the mysterious stranger? And what terrifying force is coming for the boy? The courtyard stood still. Ada clutched her son tightly, her heart pounding. Toby's fists remained clenched at his sides. The stranger's eyes flickered to the child. There is little time. Jide finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. Who are you? The man exhaled, his shoulders heavy with unseen weight. I am a messenger. From who? Toby asked sharply. The stranger's lips barely moved. The ones who sleep beneath the ocean floor. A chill crept through the air. Ada's breath hitched. What do they want? The men did not blink. Your son. The wind howled through the palace grounds. And for the first time, Toby and Ada realized this was only the beginning. That night, Ada could not sleep. She lay beside Toby, but her mind raced. The stranger's words echoed in her ears. They will want him for themselves. She turned to look at her baby, who slept peacefully in a woven bassinet near their bedside. His tiny chest rose and fell. But something was strange. His breathing matched the rhythm of waves. In. Out. In. Out. Ada's stomach twisted. She reached out and brushed his cheek. And her fingers came back wet with salt water. She gasped. The child stirred, his small fingers twitching. His lips moved, though he was asleep. And then, in a voice not his own, he whispered. The tide is coming. Ada jerked back. And deep beneath the sea, something ancient began to wake. Far from the kingdom, beyond the horizon where the ocean stretched endlessly, the waters began to churn. The sea boiled, the waves twisting unnaturally. And deep, deep below, where no mortal had ever set foot, the watchers stirred. They had been asleep for centuries. Waiting. Watching. And now. They had sensed him. The child of 2 worlds. The one who could open the gates. The water trembled as a voice, low, guttural, ancient, echoed through the dark. He has awakened. Another voice, rough as crashing waves, responded. Then we must claim him before the land does. The ocean groaned, the depths shifting. The watchers were rising. And nothing could stop them now. Morning came, but Ada's fear did not fade. She studied her son, searching for any other strange signs. And then, she saw it. A faint, shimmering mark on his left shoulder. It was barely visible, like a ripple in water. But when the light hit it just right, Ada saw. It was shaped like a spiral. Toby saw her staring. "What is it?" Ada hesitated. Then, she traced the mark with her fingertip. "It wasn't there before," she whispered. Toby frowned. "What does it mean?" G-Day, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "It means the ocean has already claimed him." A cold silence filled the room. Ada's grip on her child tightened. She would not let them take him. She would fight the ocean itself if she had to. But deep in her heart, she knew. The tide was coming. And it would not stop. That evening, dark clouds rolled in from the sea. The villagers gathered in fear. "A storm is coming," they murmured. But this was no ordinary storm. The waves crashed against the shore, rising higher than ever before. Lightning sliced through the sky, illuminating something huge moving beneath the waves. G-Day stood at the edge of the palace balcony, his face pale. "It has begun," he murmured. Toby stood beside him. "What do we do?" G-Day turned to him, his expression grim. "You must leave the kingdom." Toby's stomach dropped. "What?" G-Day's voice was low, urgent. "If you stay here, they will come. And they will not stop until they have the boy." Ada stepped forward, clutching her son to her chest. "We can't run forever." G-Day's eyes darkened. "No. But you can buy time." The storm raged. The ocean roared. And from its depths, a figure began to rise. Their time was running out. What happens next? The watchers of the deep are awakening. The storm is only the first sign of their arrival. But what do they want? And can Toby and Ada protect their son from the forces of the ocean itself? Thunder rumbled through the sky. The palace shook as violent winds howled through the kingdom. Toby stood at the balcony, his knuckles white as he gripped the railing. From the shore, the waves had risen to terrifying heights. The water churned, swirling as if something beneath it was stirring. And then, a deep, bone-chilling voice echoed from the storm. "Give us the child." Ada gasped, holding her son close. The baby stirred in her arms, his tiny fingers twitching as if he could hear them. Toby's breath caught. From the ocean, a massive shadow began to rise. Lightning flashed, revealing a figure standing atop the waves. A tall, cloaked being, its face hidden beneath a hood of shifting water. It stood effortlessly on the raging sea, its voice a whisper and a roar at once. "He does not belong to you." G-Day stepped forward, gripping his staff. His voice was calm, but firm. "He is our son. You cannot take him." The figure tilted its head. "Is that what you believe?" Another wave crashed, sending water surging toward the palace walls. The watchers had come. And they would not leave empty-handed. The first wave struck with unimaginable force. The water rushed through the streets, knocking down stalls, flooding homes, tearing through stone. The people screamed as the ocean invaded their land. Guards rushed forward, but the moment they stepped into the water, they froze. Their bodies stiffened, their eyes turning dark, as if the sea itself had taken hold of them. Toby swore under his breath. "They're turning them into warriors." G-Day raised his staff. "The watchers are claiming the strong. We must leave. Now." Ada hesitated, looking down at her child. "But where do we go?" A voice answered from the shadows. "To the only place the ocean cannot reach." They turned. And standing there, Dressed in a cloak of woven reeds, was Nia, the mermaid. Toby's blood ran cold. "You," he growled. Ada stiffened. She still remembered the night the mermaid had appeared in the palace, forcing them to promise their firstborn in exchange for Toby's life. But Nia's golden eyes were calm. "You hate me," she said simply. "But right now, I am your only chance." Toby clenched his fists. "Why would you help us?" Nia stepped forward, her gaze flicking to the baby. "Because you do not understand what is coming." Jide narrowed his eyes. "Explain." Nia sighed. "The Watchers are not like me. They are not gods. They are ancient. Older than the rivers. Older than the land itself." Ada swallowed. "Then what do they want?" Nia's expression darkened. "They want your son because he is the key." A bolt of lightning split the sky. The Watchers' whispers grew louder. Time was running out. And the only way to survive might be trusting the very being they once feared. "We cannot stay here," Jide said. "If what she says is true, the child is the key to something greater." Ada hesitated. "But what if we're running right into their hands?" Toby looked at the flooded streets, at the guards frozen in unnatural silence, their eyes dark as the deep sea. He made his decision. "We leave," he said. Jide nodded. "Then we must go now." Toby turned to Nia. "Where do we go?" The mermaid's golden eyes flickered. "There is an island," she said. "A place where even the ocean dare not touch." Ada frowned. "Why?" Nia's expression was unreadable. "Because something even older than the Watcher sleeps there." The wind howled. And the battle was just beginning. They traveled through the storm, pushing against the violent winds. The Watchers did not follow. Not yet. But the ocean whispered. It called for the child. And the child. He listened. For as they neared the mysterious island, the baby opened his eyes. And for the first time, he spoke. A single word, in a language no mortal had spoken for 1,000 years. Awaken. A rumble shook the island. And deep beneath the ground, something stirred. What happens next? The Watchers are closing in. The ocean is calling. And now, something even older has awakened. But what sleeps on the island? And will the child's power save the world, or destroy it? The moment the baby spoke, the earth beneath them shuddered. The island, silent for centuries, now groaned as if it had been disturbed from a deep sleep. Jide pressed a hand to the ground, his face pale. The land is alive. Nia's golden eyes darkened. No, she whispered. Something beneath it is alive. Toby tightened his grip on Ada's hand. What did he just say? Ada was trembling, holding their son close. It didn't sound like any language I've ever heard. Jide turned to Nia. You know, don't you? The mermaid hesitated. Then she exhaled. There was a reason the ocean feared this place, she said. A reason the Watchers never dared to come here. The air thickened with an eerie silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. Toby's heartbeat thumped loudly in his ears. What's buried here? Nia's voice was barely a whisper. The first guardian. The ground beneath them cracked. And suddenly, they were falling. The ground split apart, and they tumbled into the darkness below. Ada screamed, clutching the baby to her chest. Toby reached for her, catching her hand just as they plunged into the unknown. The air rushed past them, the fall endless, until, finally, they landed. Softly. As if something unseen had caught them. Jide groaned, pushing himself up. Is everyone all right? Ada checked the baby. He was silent, staring wide-eyed into the darkness. Toby helped her up. Where are we? A dim, golden light flickered around them. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the walls, ancient and pulsing like a heartbeat. Jide stepped closer, tracing his fingers over the markings. These are older than any writing I've seen. Nia remained still, her eyes darting around. We should not be here. Toby frowned. I thought you said this island was safe. The mermaid's throat bobbed. It was, until you woke him. Then, a voice rumbled through the darkness, low and thunderous. Who disturbs my sleep? The walls shook. And in the flickering light, something enormous began to move. The earth trembled. Jide, Toby, and Ada stood frozen as the ground beneath them shifted. Then, out of the darkness, it emerged. A massive figure, taller than the tallest trees, woven from stone and gold. Its body was marked with the same glowing symbols that covered the walls. Its eyes, deep and endless, locked onto the child in Ada's arms. At last, the guardian rumbled. Ada stiffened. At last, what? The guardian did not blink. He has come. The one who will tip the balance. Toby's chest tightened. Balance? Between what? The guardian's head tilted slightly. Between the land and the sea. A heavy silence fell. Jide exhaled. You mean the war between the Watchers and the gods of the land? The guardian's gaze did not move from the child. The war is already here. The baby blinked, staring up at the massive being. And then, he smiled. And in a voice that was not his own, he whispered, I remember you. The guardian bowed. And that was when Toby and Ada realized. Their son was not just any child. He was something more. Something far older than they could ever understand. Jide's breath came fast. No, that's impossible. The guardian remained still. And yet, it is true. Ada's arms tightened around her baby. He's just a child. The guardian's deep voice rumbled. No. He is a bridge. Toby swallowed. A bridge, between what? The guardian's golden eyes glowed. Between the gods of the ocean and the gods of the land. Jide took a step back. Then that means. Yes. The guardian looked at Ada. He is the firstborn of two worlds. A hush fell over them. And far above, beyond the cave, beyond the island, the ocean raged. The Watchers had felt it. They knew. And they were coming. The moment the guardian spoke, something in the ocean shifted. The Watchers, who had been waiting at the shores, suddenly moved. The waves rose, twisting into impossible shapes. Figures began to rise from the water, warriors, their skin glistening with the curse of the deep. Their eyes glowed black. And at the center of them all, a woman stepped forward. Her presence alone made the sea quiver. She wore a gown of woven mist, her hair like flowing rivers. Her fingers curled, and the tides obeyed her command. She was the queen of the Watchers. And her voice was the sound of the storm itself. Find the child. The warriors moved. The sea rushed forward. The war for the child had begun. What happens next? The guardian has awakened. The Watcher's queen is coming. The war for the child's fate is about to begin. Will the guardian protect them? Or will the ocean finally claim what it seeks? The ocean raged. Lightning split the sky. The waves swirled into a monstrous vortex as the Queen of the Watchers stepped onto the shore. She did not need to walk. The water carried her. Her eyes, deep and endless, glowed like the darkest parts of the ocean. She raised a hand, and the waves rose higher, swallowing the land inch by inch. Behind her, warriors of the deep emerged, men and women taken by the ocean's curse, their bodies twisting with power from the Watchers. They had one mission. to find the child. The queen's voice echoed through the storm. He is ours. Return him now, or face the wrath of the sea. In the distance, the island shook. Deep below, in the cavern where Toby, Ada, and the others had fallen, the guardian of the land lifted its massive head. Its golden eyes blazed. Then come and take him. The war had begun. The earth rumbled as the guardian rose to its full height. Its body, woven from stone, roots, and ancient power, pulsed with golden light. It turned to Toby and Ada, its voice a deep thunder. The time has come. If you wish to save your child, you must choose your side. Toby's jaw clenched. We are with you. Ada swallowed hard, gripping their son tightly. But, can we win? The guardian's golden gaze dimmed. The ocean is relentless. But the land does not bow easily. The cavern walls shook, and suddenly, roots burst forth from the ground, twisting and climbing toward the surface. Nia's breath hitched. The island is waking up. Jide's eyes widened as the golden symbols on the walls glowed brighter. And then, the earth itself began to move. Mountains rose, cliffs shifted, and trees grew at impossible speeds, forming barriers between the sea and the land. But the Queen of the Watchers only smiled. You think the land can stop the tide, she whispered. Then, with a flick of her fingers, she called forth the storm. The first wave struck with the force of 1,000 warriors. Water smashed against the island, tearing apart the cliffs and flooding the forests. The sky turned dark, heavy with the weight of the Watcher's wrath. The Guardian raised a hand, and the trees shifted, bending into massive shields to block the raging sea. For a moment, it seemed like the land could hold. But then, the warriors of the deep charged forward. Their eyes glowed black, their bodies moving unnaturally fast as they leapt onto the land, their hands curling into claws. Toby grabbed Ada's hand. We need to run. Jide tightened his grip on his staff. No. We fight. The Guardian stepped forward. Then let the battle begin. And the land itself answered its call. The island erupted into chaos. The warriors of the deep clashed against the land's defenders, creatures of stone, vines, and golden energy, summoned by the Guardian. Toby fought beside Jide, wielding a spear made from the island's magic. Nia, caught between both worlds, stood at the edge of the battlefield, her heart torn. She had once sought revenge. Now, she wasn't sure where she belonged. The Queen of the Watchers moved gracefully through the chaos, untouched by the battle. Her eyes were locked on Ada and the child. She raised her hand. And suddenly, Ada's body froze. The baby let out a small gasp, his tiny fingers trembling as the ocean's power wrapped around him. The Queen smirked. You cannot run from destiny. And in a flash, she vanished, taking Ada and the child with her. Darkness. Cold, endless darkness. Ada gasped, struggling to breathe as icy water wrapped around her body. She was no longer on the island. She was beneath the sea. The Queen of the Watchers stood before her, the child now resting in her arms. Her expression was unreadable. Did you really think you could keep him from me? She whispered. Ada shook, reaching for her son. Give him back. The Queen tilted her head. He belongs to the ocean. Ada's heart pounded. No, she said, her voice firm. He belongs to himself. The Queen's lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. We shall see. And with that, she turned. And the ocean swallowed them whole. What happens next? The Queen has taken Ada and the child into the deepest depths of the sea. Toby, Jide, and the Guardian must find a way to reach them before the Queen claims the child forever. Will Ada be able to protect her son in the Watcher's domain? Can Toby and Jide save them before it's too late? The war between land and sea is far from over. Darkness. Ada's lungs burned as she sank deeper and deeper into the ocean's abyss. The water around her was freezing, thick and endless, pressing against her from all sides. She struggled, reaching for her baby, but the Queen of the Watchers held him tight in her arms, moving effortlessly through the deep. "Stop fighting," the Queen said, her voice a calm echo in the water. Ada's vision blurred. She was losing air. Her limbs weakened, her body sinking. No. She wouldn't give up. With the last of her strength, she reached out, toward her son. The baby turned his head, his small, glowing eyes locking onto hers. And suddenly, the water around Ada shifted. A strange warmth spread through her body. The crushing weight of the ocean lifted, and suddenly, she could breathe. Her eyes widened. What? The Queen watched her with an amused expression. He is awakening. Ada clutched her chest, realizing the truth, her child had saved her. But why? And how? The Queen turned, swimming deeper. Come, Ada. You must see what awaits him. The shadows of the deep stirred. And something ancient moved beneath them. Far above, on the island, Toby's rage was unstoppable. "We have to go after them," he shouted, gripping Jide's arm. "We can't let her take them." Jide's face was grim. "Even if we wanted to, how do we reach them? The ocean is her domain." Nia, standing nearby, had been silent. Now, she stepped forward. "There is one way." Toby turned to her, his eyes wild with desperation. "Tell me." Nia hesitated. "It is dangerous." "I don't care." Toby snapped. "I will walk into the depths of the sea myself if I have to." Jide placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Think, Toby. If we act recklessly, we'll all be lost." Toby clenched his fists, but forced himself to breathe. Nia's golden eyes flickered with uncertainty. "The Queen may control the ocean, but there is one thing even she cannot defy." Jide narrowed his eyes. "What?" Nia exhaled. "The path of the lost." A cold wind blew over the island. And the Guardian, who had been watching silently, finally spoke. "Then we must find it before it's too late." The path was older than time itself. Hidden beneath the island's deepest caves, it was a bridge between two worlds, a place where the living could step into the realm of the sea without drowning. But it came at a terrible price. As Toby, Jide, and Nia descended into the cavern, they felt an unnatural stillness. Jide shivered. "This place feels wrong." The Guardian of the Land stood at the entrance, its golden eyes watching them closely. "You seek the ocean's domain," it rumbled. "But be warned, once you enter the path, you may never return." Toby squared his shoulders. "I don't care. I need to save them." The Guardian was silent for a moment. Then, it stepped aside. The entrance revealed itself, a tunnel of glowing blue mist, stretching deep into the earth. Nia's voice was a whisper. "The gate to the ocean's heart." Jide hesitated. "If we do this, we may never escape her grasp." Toby swallowed hard. But in his heart, there was no doubt. He stepped forward. "Then let's go." And with that, they plunged into the unknown. Deep in the ocean's heart, Ada stood before a massive, sleeping figure. It was impossibly large, its body made of shadows and water. Ancient symbols pulsed along its skin, the same ones that had glowed on her child. She could feel its power. And somehow, she knew its name. The First Watcher. The Queen of the Watchers watched her closely. "Do you see now?" she murmured. Ada clutched her son close. "What is this?" The Queen smiled. "This is where it began. The first war between land and sea." She stepped forward, eyes glowing. "Your child carries its soul." Ada's heart stopped. She looked down at her baby, his small hands glowing, his gaze locked onto the ancient being. "No," Ada whispered. The queen's smile deepened. "Yes. And soon, he will awaken it once more." The ocean shuddered. And the first watcher opened its eyes. What happens next? Toby and Jide have stepped onto the path of the lost, a dangerous gateway into the heart of the ocean. Will they reach Ada in time? Meanwhile, Ada has learned a terrifying truth. Her child carries the soul of the first watcher, the ancient being that started the war between land and sea. Now, the first watcher is awakening. Will Ada find a way to protect her son? Or is it already too late? The war for the ocean is about to begin. The ocean shuddered. The massive figure in the depths, the first watcher, stirred from its endless slumber. Its eyes, deep and ancient, glowed with the weight of forgotten ages. Ada could not move. Her son, her tiny, innocent child, reached out toward the colossal being as if drawn by an unseen force. The glow in his hands pulsed in time with the symbols on the watcher's skin. The queen of the watchers watched with satisfaction. "It is destiny," she murmured. Ada's breath hitched. "No. I won't let you take him." She tried to step back, but the water tightened around her, holding her in place. The queen turned her piercing gaze toward Ada. "You don't understand, do you?" She lifted a hand, and the waters around them began to swirl. "Your child is not just an heir of land and sea." The watcher's enormous form began to shift, and its booming voice rumbled through the abyss. "He is my soul returned." Ada's heart stopped. She shook her head. "No, that can't be true." The queen smiled. "It is. And now, he will finish what was started long ago." The ocean roared. And the child began to glow even brighter. Meanwhile, on the path of the lost, Toby, Jide, and Nia raced against time. The tunnel of mist and water seemed endless, twisting and turning like a living thing. The deeper they went, the more the ocean's whispers filled their ears. Turn back, you do not belong here." Toby shook his head, gripping his spear tightly. "We're close. I can feel it." Jide wiped sweat from his brow. "The queen is trying to scare us." But Nia suddenly froze. Her eyes widened. "No, this is something else." The air shifted. And then, the tunnel collapsed. The three of them plunged into darkness. Back on the island, the guardian of the land stood at the edge of the water, its golden eyes watching the storm brewing over the sea. The island itself was shaking. The balance of the world was crumbling. It turned to the sky, whispering a message to the wind. If they fail, all will be lost. And far away, something ancient and hidden stirred from the heart of the earth. For the first time in thousands of years, the spirit of the land awakened. Toby hit the ground hard, his vision spinning. The tunnel was gone. They were no longer on the path. Instead, they had fallen into a vast, underwater temple. Massive pillars stretched toward a ceiling of swirling water, glowing symbols covering every inch of stone. Jide groaned, pushing himself up. "Where are we?" Nia gasped. "This is..." Toby didn't wait for an answer. His heart pounded. He could feel Ada. He could feel his child. He turned to the others. "I don't care where we are. We need to move." And without waiting, he ran toward the light at the end of the temple. Deep in the ocean, Ada struggled against the queen's power, her heart racing as the first watcher loomed before her. Her child's glow was growing stronger. The queen lifted her hand, preparing to complete the final ritual. But then, something unexpected happened. The child's tiny fingers clenched, and he turned away from the queen. The glowing energy rippled, but instead of flowing toward the watcher, it pulsed backward, wrapping around Ada instead. The queen's eyes narrowed. The first watcher's voice shook the ocean. What is this? The queen stepped forward. The ritual is failing. The child reached for his mother. And suddenly, Ada understood. Her son was choosing her. Not the queen. Not the ocean. Not destiny. Her. The queen's face twisted in fury. "No!" she shrieked. She lunged for the child. But at that moment, the temple shook. A blinding golden light burst through the waters. And Toby appeared. The moment Toby stepped into the temple, the ocean trembled. He took one look at Ada, at their son, at the queen's outstretched hands. And his rage exploded. Get away from them. The spear in his hand glowed with golden fire, its power surging through the water like a living force. The queen hissed, turning toward him. You should not be here, land dweller. Toby did not care. With a mighty roar, he charged. The queen of the watchers raised her hands, summoning the full force of the sea. But Toby did not stop. He threw the spear. The golden weapon pierced the water, cutting through the darkness like a burning sun. And struck the first watcher's chest. The ocean screamed. The queen gasped. And the watcher's body began to crack. The ancient being let out a deafening roar. And in that moment, Ada clutched their child and ran. The temple began to collapse. Toby turned, reaching for Ada. We have to go, now. The queen snarled. This is not over. But as the temple crumbled around them, the ocean itself seemed to turn against her. The golden fire from Toby's spear spread through the depths. And the first watcher began to fall. What happens next? The final battle has begun. The first watcher is falling, but the queen of the watchers is not finished yet. Toby, Ada, and their son are running for their lives, but will they make it out before the ocean claims them forever? And what will happen to the queen now that her plan has failed? The legend is nearing its end. The underwater temple shuddered, cracks snaking through its massive stone pillars. Toby grabbed Ada's hand, pulling her toward the tunnel of light that led to the surface. We have to go, now. Ada clutched their son tightly against her chest, his tiny body still glowing with an unearthly power. Behind them, the first watcher's massive body was crumbling, its deep voice echoing through the waters. The balance is broken. The queen of the watchers let out a furious shriek. You will not leave this place alive. She threw her hands forward, and the ocean obeyed her rage. A tidal wave surged from the depths, rushing toward them with crushing force. Ada gasped, but before she could react, Nia appeared. The mermaid sorceress spread her arms, and a glowing barrier of golden water rose between them and the wave. The waters crashed against the shield, shaking the temple with thunderous force, but Nia did not break. She turned to Toby, her face grim. Go. I will hold her off. Toby hesitated. But... Go, she shouted. There was no time to argue. Toby clenched his jaw and ran, pulling Ada along with him. As they reached the final archway, the queen of the watchers let out an unearthly scream. And the ocean shook with her fury. The queen would not be denied. She raised her arms one final time, her power gathering into a swirling vortex of dark water. Her voice was pure venom. If I cannot have him, then neither will you. A bolt of black energy shot from her hands, straight toward the child. Ada's eyes widened in horror. No. She turned her body, shielding her son. But before the curse could strike, a golden light erupted before them. Toby gasped as a figure appeared, stepping between them and the queen's curse. It was G-Day. The old man raised his staff, and the curse collided with him instead. A shockwave of energy rippled through the collapsing temple. G-Day staggered, his face twisting in pain. The queen's eyes widened in shock. You. G-Day grinned through the pain. Did you think you were the only one with ancient power? He lifted his hand and snapped his fingers. The golden light surrounding him exploded outward, slamming into the queen and shattering her form into 1,000 droplets of water. The ocean screamed. And the queen of the watchers was no more. Toby and Ada rushed to Jide's side, but they already knew. The curse had done its damage. Jide sank to his knees, breathing heavily, his body flickering between solid and mist. Ada's hands trembled. "Jide, don't go." The old man chuckled weakly. "Ah, you too, you were always so stubborn." Toby's jaw clenched. "There has to be a way to save you." Jide smiled. "My time was borrowed, Toby. And now, the ocean is calling me home." He turned to the child, his golden eyes soft. "Protect him," he whispered. And then, his body dissolved into golden mist, carried away by the tides. Ada buried her face in her hands, silent tears mixing with the ocean. Toby clenched his fists. Jide was gone. But the ocean was at peace. The waters parted. The golden path of the lost reappeared, leading them home. As they stepped onto it, the temple behind them crumbled into nothing, the ancient battle finally over. The ocean had been reset. Nia swam beside them, silent, her expression unreadable. As they neared the surface, Toby turned to her. "What will happen to you now?" Nia looked at the child. "The Watchers are gone. The sea will need new guardians." She gave a small smile. "Perhaps your son will choose to return one day." Ada held him close. "Perhaps, but not today." With that, they stepped back onto land. The guardian of the land was waiting for them. It looked at the child, its golden eyes glowing. "The balance has been restored." It turned to Toby. "You have paid your price. Now, live well." With that, the guardian vanished into the wind. Toby and Ada stared at the sunrise over the ocean, the child between them. The battle was over. But their journey was just beginning. Epilogue: the legend lives on. Years passed. The fisherman-turned-prince built a home, far from the palace, where the sea met the land. He and Ada raised their son, teaching him of both worlds, the land of men and the mysteries of the deep. But sometimes, on quiet nights, Toby would look out at the ocean, and he could hear Jide's laughter in the wind. And in the depths of the sea, a child's voice called to the waves. A voice that the ocean never forgot.